And we are live here to chat about what we watched this week. I am joined by Kate, who probably wants to start off by expressing her disapproval and non-complicitness in the Bachelor being used as the thumbnail. Is that correct, Kate?
You said last week you weren't going to talk about it, and you once again lied to my face.
I did. I'm what I lack.
Hey,
What
I mean, it was
lack.
predictable. I knew it was coming, but
What I lack in honesty, I make up for in consistency. You know what I mean? Like, I'm nothing if not
yes,
predictable. Here's the thing. I kind of believed myself last week because I'm like, this show, like, obviously The Bachelor is supposed to be like very like mindless entertainment, which I'm all about because I'm always doing something else at the same time. So like, just a little preview, one of the things I'm going to be talking about very, very briefly that I watched this week is Winona Earp. And like, that's a good example of a show where like, I don't know what's going on at any time. Like because I'll do it while I'm reading this or doing the in one ear and out the other. I'm just there to like kind of absorb the vibes and enjoy the characters, right? And that's kind of how I am with The Bachelor. And then this season of The Bachelor, they're like, we're going to be, showing women like constantly bullying each other. I think like the last time I really seriously talked about it, there was like all this stuff where they were accusing somebody of being a sex worker and like all this sort of, they just bite off bigger issues than they are qualified to handle. And it's like, I'm not going on to, like, I'm not going to that show to like get social justice theory information. I am as like deep blue bleeding as they come, and I will go elsewhere for that information. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Anyways, but we'll get into that. But I just thought I should, just acknowledge the elephant in the room that we've got a Bachelor thumbnail. I'm so sorry. Right off the bat, I don't have any news before we get into DC TV, but Kate, do you have any news?
I mean, there's the cat, Mcteer, who played Mia in Arrow.
Uh-huh.
She is in a new movie coming out, and it just came out today. It's kind of like a Hallmarky, cutesy movie, but I watched the trailer. I was like, I might watch that movie. We'll see.
That sounds fun. What genre is it?
It's very much like a young adult guy is a movie star, and she's like a musician, and they both go to Ireland for some reason, and that's really neat.
Oh, it's cute. So it probably came out for like St. Patty's Day.
Maybe, yeah.
Speaking of St. Patty's Day, so this is being live streamed on St. Patty's Day. I'm wearing green. I'm
I
uncharacteristic.
forgot. I live. Green's my favorite color. Half my clothes are green. I just forgot.
I have had this hoodie since I was in high school, and not even like late high school, like probably early high school. And I am not young. So for me to have something from high school, it's basically vintage. Carrie says, "Good evening." You could always put Barry Allen as the thumbnail. See, I am so willing to put villains as the thumbnail. And in fact, I see that the two people in the current thumbnail combined at least form one whole villain. But for this week, since it was Bachelor finale week, I thought I should just like, it's sort of like me walking into a confession booth and like confessing my sins. It's like, this is genuinely what I've been consuming. I'm just going to be transparent with you guys, and we'll try to talk about it really briefly. And I won't get into, the that's a lie. Like, I was about to be like, I'm not going to get into like the I'm obviously going to reference the controversy. Like, of course I am. There was literally nothing else in the finale. Okay. Carrie says green like She-Hulk. Yes. Green like the green dress, the woman who won the Bachelor for 0.02 seconds war. Yes. Okay. So right off the bat, Carrie perfect transition. Let's talk about DC TV this week because my goodness, you guys. Okay, so we'll start with the Flash because that's where I've got the most bone to pick. Okay, so you understand, and I keep harping on this, and I keep saying this isn't even my place to like. Why do I keep advocating for this character? This isn't even my favorite character. Maybe I care more about this character than I thought. Okay, so this whole time, like we're on what, like season 7 or some shit at this point. This whole time, everybody and their mother from all sides, like no matter what you ship or whatever, has been like, you have not been giving Iris her due. You've not been writing her well. And it doesn't really matter like what side you're on, whether you're like, I like her and I would like her written better, or whether you're like, I don't like her, she's written terribly, or whether you're kind of in the middle like me, where I'm like, I don't like her as she is written, but I could see a lot of potential. You know what I mean? Like, she's not my favorite character, but it's because you write her like shit. This finale, and this, okay, so I'm calling it finale. It was the 3rd episode in the season, but because of COVID, they're kind of having to air things out of order. So the episode that aired as episode 3 of season 7 or whatever this is was supposed to be their season 6 finale. And from what I can tell, they didn't really seem to like edit it any differently to try to get it to meld into the season. I'm pretty convinced that it aired mostly intact to what it would have been in the finale, like as written for the finale. Okay, so this should have been a huge episode. This should have been like by far better than just your regular like episode of the week. This character, she was, you know, she is supposed to be the female lead, the whole like holding down what. She is unconscious for half the episode. They literally have her in a coma for half the episode. Kate, when I tell you, I would have been screaming from the rooftops had they done this to Felicity in a finale. She was unconscious for half the episode. And then once she regains consciousness, with also some weird editing where they couldn't really do it. I think they're trying to avoid kissing scenes, which they didn't really have much like of that anyways, but it just felt very unromantic. But, you know, like what can you do? It's COVID. But they had her basically like it. I just didn't like the optics of it. Basically, she has to like risk being torn limb from limb, atom to atom, whatever, in order to funnel enough energy for Barry to run through the Speed Force and like do some stuff in another dimension. Okay. And she just like does it without a second thought, has only been regained consciousness for like 2 seconds. And I get like, okay, check me if I'm like Carrie and Kate and anybody else watching. If I'm being too villainous in this moment or too selfish, like absolutely check me. But I really feel like that was a very watered down version of heroism. Like, I'm very tired of seeing women just throw themselves on the sword or risk their life of like, I'm not going to do anything other than just like literally risk my life, like basically throwing myself on a grenade in order to save somebody. Like, I want some substance. And even for the rest of the characters, the rest of the team, the rest of the everything, like there just wasn't much substance to it. But because like, okay, so Barry in the last like crossover, the last meaningful thing all of us probably watched, and I use meaningful here loosely, he was declared the paragon of love. You remember that? You watched that episode. I know. So that was supposed to be what was central to this, because if you think about when this would have aired, it would have aired much closer to that crossover than it currently is. Like they were still on the whole paragon kick at that time. So his finale was supposed to be like, you can't solve this with your brain or your body, you must solve this with your heart. Okay, cheesy, but I'm always here for a good romantic bullshit moment, right? Like, draw me in, sell me some shitty romance, like whatever. It did not sell. The villain at one point, this is what really drove me up the wall. And then I'm going to pause and I want to hear your thoughts if you have thoughts, especially if you want to talk me down and like check some of my villainy side. The villain, she tells him, if you are such a hero, why haven't you made the world a better place? He straight up dodges the question and never answers it in the entire episode. And I'm like, no, let's go back, re-roll that, call me a villain. I just want to know, like, why haven't you made the world a better place? Why are you responsible for so many deaths? Like, explain, have the mic. Anyways, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Because okay, so just to address that point, we love it when in Arrow in the later seasons they would call out how stupid it was that they were going to write Laurel and Oliver a romance. Like they would laugh in their own faces. So maybe they're trying to like point to like yes, we're self-aware enough to know that he is also a villain in his own right. But yeah, first of all, I can't watch Flash anymore for these very reasons. I just can't. I never got the writing for him because you can make your hero flawed. It's what makes them interesting. But like, you also can't say that they're not flawed when you do. So he's an extremely flawed character, but they're like, he is great. And we're like, no, he's not.
Right.
So, but when they do the same thing, they almost do the same thing from what I understand of Iris going still with her, where basically she's kind of like this pinnacle of everything he's supposed to love and like cherish, and she can't do it wrong. But that's not an interesting character. So for her to just wake up and immediately go, yeah, I'm gonna die, like
Right.
that's weird. Um, it's also like it's not to say that we haven't had heroes before that would just lay themselves in the line, or even like if there was their story that didn't make sense. But for her to wake up, go, all right, that's fine. And especially since like how they structure it, it doesn't seem like it's a big sacrifice. Like how you're saying it, even though it's death, like when you don't put weight in a sacrifice, you're just saying things at this point.
Right. They
So
haven't yet, they hadn't like given the connection of like her, like, okay, so a weighty thing they could have done that could have given her some like good acting material to play with would be for her to have a scene with her dad after she comes to out of a coma, and they're talking through the risks of her potentially trying to see like, is the whatever power in her enough to fuel Barry with love to get him through the speed for, like something where she's acknowledging all this risk with her family. They never give her this. And I I harp on their treatment of female characters, but with the other women in this episode, at least with like Cecile, they gave her a moment where she basically gets possessed by like an evil person, and it feels kind of oddly edited, but I'm giving them a pass on that because like the finale aired out of place. But with Cecile, they gave her like some material to work with where she got to be loving and loved. She got to use her intuit powers. She got to be near the action. She got to like play her evil side. There was just a lot they gave her to work with. With Caitlin, they didn't give her a lot to work with, but I don't think she was supposed to be in the episode in the first place as originally written, so I can't harp on that at all. So with this, I'm just like, really, after all of this, like they've changed showrunners 2 times, they've made all of these statements and effort that they're going to be writing women better, and for them to fall short. And I wouldn't care if this truly was just episode 3, because I'm like, sometimes you fall short. Like not every episode can solve everything, not every episode needs to make a statement, not every episode needs to progress every character. But with this, I had already cut Barry off. Like I have no investment in him at this point. He has been so clearly a villain, and if they would acknowledge that and write towards that and really dive into that, I would be so invested. If they're not, then there's just a disconnect in how I'm going to see him and how they're going to write him, so I can't really like judge that. But with Cisco, with what's her name, Nash's daughter, like every single emotional moment was cut short, and it didn't help that like the premise of the finale felt like really stupid, but like cheesy's not my thing. So again, I'm giving the show a pass on that. It was just very frustrating. Carrie in the chat says Kate's eye roll was priceless. Strongly agree. And he adds, to be fair,
which
that is the
one? I think I
weakness.
rolled my eyes about 100 times.
He says, to be fair, that's the weakness of a lot of heroes. They thwart evil, but rarely do they have a vision where they do great things for humanity, often other than stopping a bad guy. Often they're just stopping bad guys. He clarifies. Yeah, and like I think that was kind of the struggle with Arrow as well. There were moments where I would talk about how, like Oliver's going through and trying to stop bad guy of the week, but like what is he doing beyond that? But at least we had I at least had the connection of like Oliver and his merry little gang as referential to Robin Hood, and it started with him taking down rich, corrupt people. He eventually was a mayor. I didn't think he was a good mayor at all, but there was always this common theme in what he was doing to try to make the world better. And I had some of the same complaints about him constantly just being willing to throw his life on the line at every little drop of a hat. But it usually wasn't without some sort of like emotional buildup towards that moment. So even if I was like, I wish he wasn't just trying to get himself killed again, I would at least acknowledge that they dramatically wrote towards it and tried to give them all good material. It's really early to, well, first of
Yeah.
all, I was going to say I don't like comparing shows, but I actually really do like comparing shows. It's a little too early to be comparing Flash to Batwoman and Superman and Lois because both of them are basically in their first season. Batwoman has reset in season 2 with a new hero. Superman and Lois is certainly in their first season. So they've got like a couple episodes under their belt as opposed to Flash, which I just expect better from. I'm constantly disappointed, but they have every opportunity to do better. They don't have, like, some CW shows do not have a good cast to work with. So when they have to write really trite dialogue or really, whatever, and it falls flat, it's because they're working with like some really intro level actors who haven't really had to work in, maybe they're hiring somebody for a supernatural role that hasn't really done supernatural or sci-fi stuff before, whatever. That's not the case with Flash, honestly. They've all had a lot of time to work on the craft. They've all, have pretty decent filmography behind them compared to some CW shows. So I don't really fault the cast for this one. With Batwoman, to move on to that, I've been pretty interested in each episode on a week to week basis. I am definitely getting to the point where I see how they've tried to change the, possibly due to COVID, they seem to have tried to change the writing so that they don't have as many all characters in one room type of scenes. We really see very few people in terms of the team or people teaming up at all. And I think that that has taken some of the city feel out of it from time to time, but that's kind of a minor complaint. The thing that I the thing that I have going against Batwoman at this time is I really dislike what they're doing with Alice's storyline entirely. I do not like the plot. I do not like the romance. I do not like the flashbacks. I do not like anything that they're doing with Alice. And Alice was my favorite character throughout this season. However, the new Batwoman in team, I'm enjoying, so I'm willing to sit through this. And I feel like this is something where I'm just going to pretend Alice's season 2 storyline never existed. Superman and Lois continues to be a high school storyline, and the adults involved are not the most interesting part. And I don't know how much longer they can continue Lana Lane's storyline. I do not enjoy Lana Lang, whatever it is. Her whole like she's gonna fall in love with every single bad guy in the general vicinity while being married to a bad guy. I don't know about that one. We'll see though. Anyways, that's my state of the DC Union address. Do you guys have any thoughts on the DC content this week, or are we just in full Marvel mode still?
I am full Marvel. I was planning on watching Superman and Lois, and then I just didn't. So I plan on catching up at least. I at least want to watch the first 5 episodes and give it a chance.
Yeah.
But it was registration week, so I I didn't have time.
I would imagine so. This is a busy week. So you're registering for fall classes?
For summer and fall, yeah.
Fun, exciting. Getting back to a sense of normalcy, I'm sure. So you usually give shows 5 episodes of a given season?
Not always, but I would say for this, it looks like something that it might take a minute to get into its stride. And especially on CW shows, it's kind of the trend anyway. It looks like the first episode is sometimes very different from what you actually end up getting.
Yeah. If I really believe in the premise of the show, I may give it up to 3, but I've been known to ditch shows after just 1 or 2 episodes. I'm terrible. I know everybody always says to like give them a little bit more than that. So 5 seems more appropriate. Well, let me know if and when you get to that. But I know you had registration this week and you were busy, but I do also know that you did watch something starring Miss Elizabeth Olsen, and I want to hear about it. So I'm turning it over to you for what I would normally call Crack Theory Corner Kate, but it's not like Crack Theory Corner. It's like you're pitching me a show. So we need to workshop the
It's a little
title.
crack theory.
Okay, okay,
It's a little crack theory. I can make it. I can stretch it. We're here.
okay.
So I know you did this too, but I've been on this track for weeks now of like doing this deep dive of Elizabeth Olsen and like falling in love with her. And she has this very like academic approach to acting, which I'm just like, yes, please. So like I just wanted to see it, her and other things. And I decided on probably the not the smartest choice of what to follow it up with, but she doesn't have very many like lighthearted content anyway. I followed it up with Sorry for Your Loss, which is actually the only other TV show she's really been a part of, and it's her. She's the main member. She also is an executive producer on the show. It's it's on Facebook Watch, so that's the thing, which
What
is
is
probably why
Facebook
it's
Watch? I've
not well.
literally never heard of that. Like I've
I
heard of the
I
TV show
had
you're
to
talking about.
find I had to figure that out myself. So you go onto Facebook and then you watch it while in Facebook. Yeah, I don't know. Also, when you watch it on your phone, you have to like you still get like the comments like on the screen laying on top of it. And even if you turn off that, you still get some overlays. And like, why is this a thing? So
What? I've
it might
never
not have been
heard
the
of this
best
before.
yeah, it's not the best platform for the show. I will say, like, it is very much a show about grief, and I can see the benefit of it having like the direct way for an audience to talk about it because all the comments are about like this is the person I lost. This show is helping me through like this, and that's great. But there's communities like that for every show, so
Mhm.
we didn't necessarily need it built in. Um, but it kind of takes the Wanda Vision grief plot and it puts it in a very like modern, realistic, regular person storyline. And whereas WandaVision was very multi like, genre bending and like sometimes it was a comedy, a sitcom, sometimes it was almost horror and action and thriller and mystery. This is very much like a realistic show. They use some like, interesting techniques to tell you about her history and stuff like that, but it's very much realism. But it's so realistic that it's like she can't get out of bed in the morning, but then when she's at work, she cracks a joke about like her with her sister, and then within 5 seconds they're fighting. So it's extremely realistic writing of like relationships and grief, and the dialogue's really good. I am a little nervous about the general plot of where that's going, but I'm gonna let it happen, let it see where it goes. I watched the first 2 episodes. It is it's interesting kind of like comparing the two works because this is kind of her big project before coming back to Wanda. So it's interesting comparing these two works and like seeing a lot of the similarities, but the character feels distinct. Like it's not Wanda, and she is uniquely likable and unlikable. She does some petty things, and like she is a complex character. But it is interesting how they kind of go about telling the 5 stages of grief in a very different way, especially since like that's a part of life that I think is missing in a lot of storytelling, and when it is there, it's kind of like quickly done and brushed over, and it's not done well in game. But I think that this one's doing a really good job, and I don't know why I decided to pick a really sad show to kind of go into, but here we are. It's actually not completely sad. I think I giggled more watching the first episode than I felt sad. The second one, not so much, but the first one I did. I laughed a good bit actually.
Okay, so there is some comic relief in it.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not like belly laughter, but it's very much just like life. Like her sister kind of is well-meaning, but like tries to get her to go back to her apartment. And at first, it's kind of like, really, like I'm the one grieving, and you just want me to go get my shirts. And then it turns into like it. At first, you feel kind of like sympathizing with the main character Lee, and then you're like, you kind of get to this level of but understanding where the sister's coming from, because the sisters also realize that Lee can't let other people do this for her. Lee has to kind of go through the process for herself. There's other things going on too. It's not completely just her dealing with the grief. She's also kind of discovering things as she's going along. So there's a little bit more to it than just her mourning the loss of her husband. But it is both extremely different and also so similar to WandaVision.
Is she okay? So the character in the show is grieving the loss of her husband, and it's set in
Mm-hmm.
modern day.
Yeah, modern day.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'd totally be down to watch it, even if it requires me to go on Facebook. I'm not a
I
big.
was like,
Go ahead.
I was like, what is this ancient machine that I must look to watch a TV show on? Like, what is this? Like when I was doing the deep dive, I noticed like she got nominated for her acting in this show too. I don't think she won the award, but I was like, oh, okay. And I clicked on it, and I actually like saw like all the nominations ever for this award, and everybody's like Hulu, HBO, Netflix, or like ABC, people places like that. Facebook. I was like, what?
It's
I
just
have to watch this on Facebook?
I don't think there is there any other social media site that is developing their own streaming content? Like I'm thinking like
I don't know, because like Instagram has like the watch, like you can watch the ITV or whatever it is. And um but I don't know, and I don't even know if there's any other real big shows on there. And they only had 2 seasons of this show, and I wonder if it's because they couldn't afford production because it wasn't making money off of this platform.
I don't know because I know like there is crowdsourced content which may occasionally be fictional.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually not fiction. You know, like if you look at like Instagram TV, Instagram Reels, all that, it's not usually like serial fictional content like television. If you look at TikTok or um, like media uploaded to Twitter, whatever,
Yeah.
it's usually not serial fictional content. Although I do know that exists, but that's usually crowd produced, so free produced. The TikTok, company itself is not hiring like screenwriters and creators to create a specific show under their label at this time. So that is what's thrown. But I never heard about that. That's interesting. Carrie says, I just did a whole bunch of Googling. I'd never heard of the show. Now I see Kelly Marie Tran was in it. What? That's
Mm-hmm.
another
Yeah,
huge
she
name tag
plays
in
the
this.
sister. Yeah, and then what's the mom? The mom is a really big actress. I can't remember. Sorry. I'm spacing on it because I remember seeing her face and going, she's in this? Uh, Janet Mcteer.
Okay. Not totally
So
sure.
she was she's been in a ton of like BBC stuff. So maybe she's not, you're not like the most A-list, but I've seen her in tons of things.
Okay. Well, I'm going to add that to my list to watch. It sounds really interesting. Always could use another sad, angsty show. Well, speaking of sad shows, we can transition to The Bachelorette or The Bachelor. Here we go. Throw that back up there. Okay, so I just thought I would give you an update, Kate, that you didn't ask for and don't care about in any way because you did not ask for weekly updates on The Bachelor, and yet here we are. So here is the thing. The reason why I allowed The Bachelor back on here is because I have a theory and I just want to vocalize it. And I don't think it's far fetched at all. So, what should probably be established as background context, and I think I mentioned this multiple times when I've talked about this show, what makes this season unique is that the Bachelor, that's the guy you see up there, has not been a contestant on The Bachelorette. Usually the show's like in a vicious cycle where, one of the top, you know, 3, 4, 5 contestants on the previous season becomes the next Bachelor party. This guy has not. He just was really good friends with somebody who was previously a contestant on The Bachelorette in a popular season. He is good friends with a popular character guy. And you may recall that I said when his friend visited him, he was talking about he believes in this process because he saw it work for his friend. His friend did not get married, did not fall in love, did not get engaged, did not get a fiance. Like all he did was get like mad popular on Instagram. So I was like, so you're just here for like that's what you mean about believing in the process. Got it. Great. We're on the same page. Fantastic. However, he kept saying like, "Oh, and I'm like really want to find my wife, whatever." But like after his friend visited, I was calling bullshit on that. However, I think he has his family in on it because here's what happened. So I'm just going to spoil the show because you're not going to watch it. And this season was straight trash. Okay. Absolute garbage fire. So he picks the girl that you see there. Like he gives her a rose. You see it right there in this little cutesy foresty setup. She has like her own controversy. We're not even getting into her at this point. Perhaps I will reference it shortly. But in this last episode, and only in this last episode, he started to be like, I have doubts about whether I'm ready for marriage. Well, then why the hell did you go on this show? Like, did you not like how has this show existed for 25 years? And it doesn't matter if you literally know nothing and have never watched a single episode, you know the premise of the show. And he'd watch it like he knows. He knows. And this whole time he played the game saying whatever. But here's the thing. So the final episode, the last two girls meet his family. So in this case, they were meeting his mom and his brother. Very great, very sweet. Like everybody loves everybody. Wonderful. Love that. But after his family, his mom and his brother are like pretty, kind and open and receptive to the girls. And the girls are very like charming. And it just seems like everybody's getting along and that this should end in one of your cliche, oh, honey, they're both so lovely. I hope you really think over this decision and whoever you pick, we're so excited to welcome in the family, like that kind of like BS, right? That like, honestly, most contestants' families do, with like a few exceptions where they have a strong preference for one or the other, or they may have a bad feeling about one, or like something like that. But in general, by the time they get down to the top two, the family is just sort of like, oh, they're both, extremely beautiful, extremely accomplished women. Love that, whatever. His family, after being so nice to them, turns around and both of them are saying to him like, well, you don't have to make a commitment right now. Love isn't the end all be all. You really don't want to rush into a decision like this, all this sort of stuff. Like as if it's news to them that he went on the show. Like again, they knew he was going on the show. They encouraged him to go on the show. All of everybody involved has to like be a part of like signing up to be on this show. Like they all have signed contract, non-disclosure, whatever too. They are like, oh, whatever, basically like walking him back off the ledge. And at first I was like, where is this coming from? This is so out of character. I knew he didn't seem like he really wanted to get marriage out of this, but why are they? Anyways, so here's my theory. I think before he even went on this show, before any of this happened, he prepped his family and said, you guys need to be my scapegoat. You need to plant those seeds. When we come down to those last episodes, I'm not really trying to get married or engaged out of this. I just want that bachelor money and those bachelor followings. So when we get down to, this last episode, you need to be like, hey, don't rush us, whatever. So I can use that as an excuse, as he does does proceed to use that as an excuse for the rest of the episode. He was like, my mom said that love is not the end all be all, and I just don't want to rush into this. And now I'm suddenly having, and it just like felt like such a bizarre 180, even though, again, I knew he didn't want that. I think he and his family planned this in advance, and I'll just say props for scamming the system, to be honest, because I can't even like feel bad for the finalist because she had a sketchy past that she didn't disclose to him. I believe she went to like antebellum parties here in the South, which is apparently a thing here in the South. I didn't grow up here, have never been to such a thing, would never go to such a thing, but I learned that such a thing exists. Anyways, and didn't like disclose that to him or really talk to him about that sort of stuff. And he says he didn't respond well to it. That's the other thing. Like, recall that I said that his like BFF was on a season of The Bachelorette. So his BFF is really good friends with said Bachelorette. They're not together, they're just like really good friends. So that guy, and that Bachelorette, and like a few other people, like all have this whole little like social media crew where they all like hype each other up for followers and stuff like that. And like multiple people in this crew, but most notably said Bachelorette, literally every like down south thing that people have a problem with this girl about, that girl has done like times a million. Like, she has said tons of racially insensitive things. She's apparently gone to like very similar like southern themed whatever stuff, and he had no problem being besties with her. Therefore, I have a hard time believing that it became an issue with this person that he chose here. I think he just needed a way out of this relationship and took it. And again, props to him for scamming the system, I guess. Like, I have no real horse in this race. And most importantly, my two favorite people, which was Katie and Michelle, are both going to get seasons of The Bachelorette. I will put them up because they are better people than who you are currently seeing on screen. Both of these two lovely ladies are both individually going to get their own season of The Bachelorette. Very thrilled about it. But all of that to say, I don't think literally almost anybody other than the two women you see on screen right now were good people in the latest season of The Bachelor. I think it was a garbage fire. I think multiple people were trying to scam the system, and not for 1 second do I think that most people on there were trying to find love, which is not a surprise to me. But like, most importantly, I don't think The Bachelor was there to find love, and he didn't. So I guess we all got what we came for. Thank you for listening.
Well, that sounds like a scam, and I'm glad I'm not watching.
I'll be watching the girl in red, Katie. I'll be watching her season of The Bachelorette starting May, and I will once again pretend to believe that garbage shows like this are ways to find love. So,
At least you learn.
yep. Well, we transition onward to what else we watched this week. And I'm going to move pretty quickly through 3 things, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about WandaVision behind the scenes stuff that you have watched this week. So, Wynonna Earp, Good Girls, and This Is Us are all 3 things that I watched this week. Wynonna Earp, I'm really not going to say much about because honestly, this show I feel like is the same as like watching an ASMR video or like watching the Shopping Network channel or watching the Discovery Channel or something where you just like you turn it on for the vibes.
Watching
but
how it's made.
Yeah, where you turn it on for the vibes, but you're not there for the plot. Like, I'm not there for the plot in any way whatsoever. It's a bunch of funny, pretty people doing dumb supernatural stuff. Love it. Could not possibly tell you who the villain is at any given time. Could not possibly tell you who has what power or what the plot line is at any given time. But really just like enjoying it as a mindless show when it's not intended to be a mindless show at all. Next, we have Good Girls. I'll throw their little hot tub thing on there. This show is so good, but the way the girl, okay, so the brunette girl, on the white brunette girl, the way she has spiraled into like hitting rock bottom, like she just threw herself under the bus for her sister. That's the center person with the red hair. The way she has spiraled to rock bottom, like even on a show like this where they're like committing federal crimes at all times, is just, I don't know from a writing standpoint how they're going to pull her out of it. And I'm like morbidly curious. She's not even my favorite character of the three or anything like that. So it's not like I'm like, oh my goodness, they must rescue Annie. But it's just like everything in her life has fallen apart. And I'm really curious how they're going to bring her back. That's all. Also, I watched This Is Us. And for once, the person that I'm mad at, not only is it not Kevin, the person I'm mad at was the person who went after Kevin, who picked a fight with. I took Kevin's side in a fight. I literally, let me tell you what it took for that to happen. I'm just going to paint a picture. I'm going to describe one singular moment in the episode in which I had to take Kevin's side. Okay. So they're at a dinner table. A lovely dinner spread is there. Recall that Kevin is like a super rich actor, whatever. So they're in his lovely home having this like lovely little sushi meal. And they're there with his sister and her husband Toby, and his like fiance, who just recall she just had twins. So she's there, and for context, in the moment when this is being discussed, she is currently breastfeeding, okay? Her newborn child is currently breastfeeding, okay? Toby lost his job, so he's having an angry man spiral, just like at all times. And Kevin is basically just like is referencing, I don't know what it is. I don't have children, so I don't know what it is, but he's referencing some kind of like baby bed swinger thing that helps like lull kids to sleep, like a rocker of some kind, which I think is like, I don't know if it was product placement or what, but it seemed like a well-known name of some sort of expensive rocker thing. And he was saying like, oh, it's so helpful, you know, with the twins that they can like, one can be fed while the other one's, you know, sleeping or something like, I don't remember. But he was asking Kate and Toby if they had it. And Kate and Toby are like going through financial hard times because Toby lost his job. Remember, angry man spiral. So basically they're saying no. And Kevin's like, oh, I'll get you one real quick. And like Kevin is like mad loaded. Okay. Like this is like the same as if he was like, oh, I'll, you know, pick you up an extra bag of ice on the way to dinner at your house. You know, like it would be nothing to him. And Toby like throws a fit, and he's like, we're, you know, you don't have to do stuff for us. We're actually doing all the hard work. You know, we don't have, you know, money covering every little baby supply thing, whatever. And then he goes on and he says, you know, and because he was talking to Kevin, and he says, you know, and we have to do all this. And Madison, referencing Kevin's fiance, has a nanny's help to just magically bring her the kids anytime that they're, you know, fussy. Whereas Kate and I have to do all this, like just basically being an asshole. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This woman just had twins. Like, yes, of course she has some, and her family's like nowhere nearby. So of course they have to have a nanny, like they have to have like security and all sorts of stuff too. But she also has twins, and like Kevin's not there all the time. Anyways, and that's when Kevin was previously just kind of like taking the beating up until then. But at that point he was like, you can say whatever you want to me, but you can't say anything about Madison because she's actually doing a really good job, whatever. And I was like, I have to take Kevin's side for once. Like, what is this? Anyways, Carrie says, siding with Kevin, mark the date and time. Also, prepare for a drug test at work tomorrow. Honestly, anyways, just note this moment, because when I come out the gate swinging at Kevin next time, you can know that I've been fair before. I've been fair to him before. And with that, I turn it over to you to discuss what else you've watched this week, which I believe is WandaVision behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, so I watched the WandaVision behind the scenes documentary, and that was very fascinating about how they talked about how they did the music, which is fun. And like to me, like they were talking about the motif they made up and how what they wanted that to mean, and how they intertwined that with all the different songs in the show, which was great. They talked about a lot about, and I guess I hadn't really thought about it, but Wanda is the character that probably is on wires the most, and I guess maybe because there's Iron Man, but he's like a different type of flying, so he's not really on wires. But I guess I just didn't think about it. So seeing her on the wires, for so long was funny, and how they talked about all the visuals and stuff, and they talked about how in the early episodes they really tried to adapt to the old techniques of filming these things, which is great. And they talked about the costumes. It was a fun watch, especially because I was like still having withdrawals from WandaVision. Um, and then I ended up watching several interviews about that too, specifically from the head writer and Elizabeth Olsen. Just one of the many interviews we watched, and one of the ones I sent to you. And I'm sitting there listening and having a fine time. And then she goes, "Yeah, and I really wanted it to reflect the 5 stages of grief." And I went, and then Elizabeth Olsen piggybacks off of that and goes, "Yeah, and it was really great how we like intertwined that with how we changed every episode to be a different generation, because each generation was more complex and it was divulging more about the complex emotions she was having." And I was like, and then Elizabeth Olsen later then said something about, yeah, it's kind of interesting because her journey is definitely about acceptance and grief, but it's also about accepting who she is and becoming more than just a tool and a weapon, but becoming the hero in her own right. And I'm like, me? Me? Really? Like I was watching that and I was like, I was definitely in the hole of like, no television's ever gonna be as good. What is life anymore? And I heard that and I was like, so like, can me and the writer be friends now? Like, because I heard her, I saw her, like we were one, and I felt heard. So I was through the roof when I watched all these behind the scenes stuff and like getting confirmation. Like I didn't care about the Easter eggs that all the comic book boys cared about. I was like, yeah, she accepted.
What does it feel like to be
So that,
so right? You're like saying exactly what the writers and lead cast are saying after the fact.
well, when they first said it, I actually like went back. I was like, did I just imagine that? Like, did they just use the exact words I was using? And it was just like, I was like giddy. I was like, oh, what is this? Ugh. Like, I am a STEM child. Like, I, what are, what are we doing? What are we doing right now?
Hey, STEM people are very good at being creative. They're very good at analysis, and especially in right now in 2020, 2021 and moving forward, I think a lot of STEM careers are going to become by necessity the most creative analysis demanding fields. I think the level of creative analysis that is necessary for the majority of STEM jobs, particularly, I'm sure the jobs that you're going to hold at your level, is going to supersede a lot of the like creative analysis. Not to compare people, but I'm going to compare people. It's going to supersede the level of creative analysis required in jobs traditionally associated with like the social sciences. So, all of that to say, having that STEM interest and having your ability for creative analysis is a very good pairing. Those are not two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Well, thanks for saying that. But yeah, I was a kid in a candy store and I sent you like all these videos and it's like, hey, watch this, watch this.
I watched the first two that you've sent me so far. So those were two analysis. Loved both of them. I thought that it was a like both of them were like very good. The first one was like why WandaVision was perfect, and then the second one was like an analysis of her character throughout it. Love both of them. Haven't got to the third one, which was the one you were just referencing, I think, which was her interview. But I did, however, watch one that you may not have watched yet, which was Elizabeth Olsen trying 10 different kinds of cheese on Bon Appetit Test Kitchen.
I did watch
Oh,
that.
you did? Did you love it? It was
I
so
watched it
good.
like 10 minutes after it came out. I was like, I don't watch Bon Appetit, but I'll watch it for this. I'm like, I have no
So
knowledge of
good.
cheese, but we're here.
You know what impressed me about, okay, so like I'm vegan, so I don't eat cheese anyways, but like it was interesting to hear her talking about food because I am very interested in food. But you know what I was impressed with in that situation is how even with a complete stranger who is not like a co-star or whatever, who is not in the same room with her in any way, she's still able to generate such mesmerizing chemistry. And I don't mean like romantic chemistry, but just like the
Yes.
chemistry of like their rapport and talking. Like she does such a good job. Brad Leone, the Bon Appetit person, whatever, who has like nothing against him, but he has a very specific kind of persona that he does, this kind of like aw shucks dad type of thing, which you either kind of like, you see a lot of times people be kind of like awkward and just like laughy around him because it's kind of a one-dimensional character that he plays. And I don't mean that in any offensive way to him at all. I think he's great at what he does, but he plays a he as a, you know, cook, he has this one-dimensional persona that's kind of like funny or whatever. She really like brings out like interest and complexity in people and made that whole thing like a very engaging narrative.
Yeah. I mean, it was her talking about cheese, and yet, like, you could see like little heart eyes in his like brain just going because she had some knowledge but didn't like seem like she didn't know it all. She was more than happy to listen to him with his knowledge. Like, it was just, I was like, I want to watch them talk about bread and like cake and like
Mm-hmm.
everything. Just talk about food and tell me things that I will go about my life now knowing that serve no purpose for me, but hey, now I know.
You know what she would be really good at? Do you know who? What was his name? It starts with like an A or whatever. It was like this old guy with like gray hair. Um, Anthony Bourdain. He had this show where he like went around the world and like tried different cuisine in like different countries or whatever. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, and when he, I believe he passed, you know, at some point recently, there was a lot of, in talking about his accolades, they were talking about how um, good he was at really engaging with people and always showing like a lot of respect to them and not, you know, putting on this sort of like dog and pony show or like making people feel like they had to do this sort of like performance or othering them or whatever. I could see her doing some sort of, whether it be food or, you know, like fashion, architecture, you know, like any sort of like point of interest, art, whatever, going around
Well,
and kind of engaging with strangers on that for like a documentary series.
yeah. I mean, and it's so funny because she is so good at that. Whereas it's also very obvious that she's more like an introverted type of person. Like she doesn't seem like she has to be the center of attention.
Mm-hmm.
She just is so welcoming. I'm like, it's infectious. I'm like mesmerized just watching her talk to people. And I also
Absolutely.
like did like such a deep dive that I found out she was like she won this award for some of her philanthropy work. I can't think, the Latitude Project is what it was called. She worked with these ladies that I think it's Costa Rica, but I could be completely wrong on that. Um, and just like then I watched like a small video of like talking about her being there and just like how she could be so like calm and like straightforward and focused when talking about the mission of the project, and yet you could see her like interacting with kids, and she could entertain the kids and then talk to the people that were kind of in charge there. And I was like, what how am I just now like hearing about this lady because she's awesome.
She sounds great.
Like, why did I have to? Yeah, why did I have to watch her have an emotional breakdown on my television to find out she's so cool?
Carrie says he plans to watch the behind the scenes WandaVision stuff this weekend. He says he has to spread out his Marvel content and he says, I will watch The Falcon and Winter Soldier also. I'm guessing you guys won't. I actually am definitely interested in watching The Falcon and Winter Soldier content. Are you going to be, Kate?
I'll watch it. It is funny. I saw an article saying basically like it's going to be the exact opposite of WandaVision. It's the
Right.
antithesis of it. It's going to be character based. I was like, and what was WandaVision? Because that was like the most character based thing we've ever seen. You mean it's just going to be spoon fed? There's no predicting. There's a difference,
Right.
which
I
I'll watch. But
I think they have my buy-in on their current type of content. I trust them to like I guess my complaint with Marvel, and I recognize that this is very outdated and people have changed since then, whatever, but my complaint was always that they were like it always felt like this white men frat club that they had like the one token woman and the one token non-white person, and they would use their tokens for everything, whatever. And that's a very outdated kind of complaint to levy against them at this point, obviously, thank goodness. And then I always felt like they often played it extremely safe. And this was in reference to the entire Avengers series, where they would perhaps somewhat reference like a difficult topic or a dark part of humanity or whatever, but then not really die. Like they still had to have their comic relief. They still had to have their whole like, we're still a happy family in some way type of thing. And that's also kind of outdated. They did stray away from that at the end. I always felt like DC took more risks and also had more failures overall. I do see Marvel taking some risks. I do see them being innovative. WandaVision's a great example of that, but because there are now examples and my complaints against Marvel are outdated as, like they're very like 2013, 2014, type of complaints, I will be watching their future content. And I'm probably going to go back and watch some of their recent past content as well, just to give myself some context because I'm a sucker. Well,
yeah, I mean, I have I have now watched all of the MCU movies other than the Spider-Man movies,
yeah.
and I've watched the first Spider-Man movie, and it gets better throughout the series, I think. But yeah, after WandaVision, they've set that bar really high for themselves, and I hope they can at least kind of get close.
Yeah. I hope they will at some point. I know we are almost at time. We can just sort of lightning round through it. What we read this week, I started Bridgerton book 4. I would say I'm like maybe a quarter of the way through it. And so far, I'm not super sold on Penelope and Colin's romance. Don't shoot me. But one reason why I may not be super sold on Bridgerton book 4 is because directly prior to starting that, I read through a fic that Kate wrote for Fitzsimmons, and it pulled off the magic of basically having them more or less together the entire time and yet still angsty, and it set the bar really high. And I'm not sure Colin and Penelope can compete at this moment. So that's all I'm saying. Carrie in the chat says, if you're still looking for content, regularly scheduled Snowpiercer plug. Oh, that's right. Actually, I was going to start that last weekend and I didn't. I think I had to catch up on something else. I don't remember. All the TV shows are coming back. So all of the like free time I had to watch previous shows is kind of like gone out the window because I'm like, oh, I suddenly do have all my DC TV shows. But Snowpiercer is high on my list. Okay, Kate, what did you read this week?
I actually finished reading a book called Roses and Rot. It's by a lady named Kat Howard. It's kind of like a magical, mystical realism. So it's very much like a realistic setting, but then there's like fairies. And I read a book of hers last year. It was my favorite book last year, called Unkindness of Magicians, and I liked that one better. But this one, Roses and Rot, is kind of had similarities with like something I went like the thing I did a couple years ago, and which was fun. But it's like these people of like they're getting close to being masters of their craft, art and writing and stuff like that. They're invited to this place and they kind of become like residents there, and they're instructed by masters of this place, but they start to find out that there's some like magical thing about it, and like it's a lot about questioning ambitions and like, would you be willing to surrender your reality and your life to basically obtain your ambitions, and what's the cost and things like that. And it was an interesting read. I think the ending could have been a little better done, but it was a really good book.
Sounds really interesting. I love a good like cross genre mystical mystery type of thing. Well,
Mhm.
I know we're 3 minutes over, so I will get us out of here. But next week, I will perhaps have started Snowpiercer. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see where we're at. We'll talk to you guys later.